everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me today. I wanted to spend today sharing with you some of my go-to breakfast sourdough recipes that I like to pair with with eggs usually for our breakfasts. And so that's what I will be sharing. So this first one that I am starting off with is some sourdough sausage balls. And this recipe originally was one that it came from a recipe that was Bisquick or Pioneer baking mix, that you would mix up that biscuit mix and then you would cook a pound of ground sausage and grate some cheese, and you would throw that in the biscuit mix and then form it into balls and bake it in the oven. And this recipe I found, or started using, I should say, when around the time that my fourth child was born, and just was discovering how hectic the mornings could be with my older three waking up and wanting to eat. I don't know about y'all, but for me, first thing in the morning is one of the most hectic times of my day because the kids usually wake up hungry, and if I don't have a plan for breakfast, it just kind of sets us up for a bad start. And so I have found that if I will have a plan, it will make life much easier. So anyway, that was when I started using this recipe. And for a long time, I would just make a batch of these sausage balls up, and then each morning I would take them out of the oven, or take them out of the refrigerator, excuse me, and put them into the oven, however many I needed for the kids that day, and then scramble some eggs to go with it, and that was their breakfast. And we did that for a while, and then as I just kind of decided I didn't want to keep using the biscuit mix, that I really wanted to go back to the whole grain baking. Again, I go in spurts just like everybody else. Sometimes I'm really motivated for the healthy cooking, and sometimes I just want what's easy. And so at that point in my life, I just needed food fixed. It didn't really, the health side of it was not my main focus. But anyway, as I kind of moved forward, as things calmed down, we found a new rhythm. I decided to find a way to make this with sourdough with whole grain. And so I am using a biscuit recipe that I will link below. That's just a sourdough biscuit. And what I do is I mix up the biscuits as the recipe says, and then they're supposed to sit overnight. And so I'll usually the night before or the day before, I will mix up this biscuit dough and allow it to sit overnight to ferment. And then the following morning, then I'll cook the sausage and the cheese and add to it. And that has been a really good transition. Everybody likes it. I like it a whole lot better. I feel a whole lot better about feeding it to my kids. And so that's what I'm doing here. This is the night before, and I am mixing up this dough really quickly. It's a really simple one that goes together. And then this is what it's going to look like sitting there overnight. You put the cold butter in there in chunks rather than melting it, but then overnight it softens as it ferments. The ferment time on this recipe is about 8 hours. And so it works really good for an overnight, but also in an effort to have something already cooked. There are many times that I have made this recipe. I will mix the biscuit dough up first thing in the morning when I wake up, and then I will let it sit through the day. And then I'm doing the actual baking of the sausage balls, the cooking the sausage and whatnot in the evening so that it's done. And so the next morning, all I'm having to do is reheat it. And so this is the next morning. I've started that ground sausage. It's just a pound of ground sausage you're just going to cook on the stove. Here is that dough. You can tell it looks much more puffy than it did the night before. That butter is softened. It will mix in well. As the mom, I have to remind myself that I set the tone for our home. If I can do, this one thing that maybe seems small, of having breakfast prepared or having a plan, spending some time the day before cooking something or getting it ready, then if that helps me be more prepared the next day and to be in a better frame of mind the next day, it's worth it, because then I can be I can be the mom that my kids need instead of being focused on my own problems and being stressed out. I can be who they need, and I can be there to help them and be cheerful while doing it. So anyway, so while that sausage is cooking, I am adding in the last couple of ingredients to this biscuit dough. You add some baking powder, baking soda, and salt, and mix it together. And it is kind of tough to mix together because it's still pretty dense dough, but you can work it in. And then once the sausage is cooked, you put the sausage in there hot, and the warmth of the sausage really helps the dough kind of come together and mix well. And then I'm also going to grate the cheese. I don't even remember what the exact amount of cheese is for this recipe. It's probably, 2 or 3 cups. I just kind of eyeball it until it looks like what I want it to look like. We like cheese in this family, so we put a little extra. If you try to make it just, a couple of cups. I will put the recipes in the description, so y'all will have those. But anyway, so grate the cheese in there. And then, like I say, we're going to add that cooked sausage to it. Here, that is nearly done. Like everything in the kitchen, a timing game of getting your things all done at the same time so you can be as efficient as possible. So now that that's done, I'm going to mix it in. And this is really pretty simple. Even on this particular day, we ate breakfast a little bit later than normal because I did do this to have them fresh for breakfast. On this day, it was a weekend day. We didn't have a whole lot going on. It was okay if everything wasn't done right on time. My husband was home. That always helps in the mornings. But anyway, there is that all combined. And I like to use a cookie scoop. You can do it with a regular spoon. You can do it with your hands. This is just what I like to do. It's just kind of keeps my hands from having to get as dirty in it. And it all makes them the same size so they cook evenly. I wanted to make a note here on the sausage that I'm using. I have said before on here that I try to make healthy choices in the foods that we eat, to try to avoid, ingredients that aren't good for us. And that is indeed a lot of my focus when I am cooking, when I'm deciding what to make. But I wanted to add here, breakfast sausage is one of those things that it's not real good for you from the store. There are a lot of additives in there that aren't real great. Sometimes the meat that is being used isn't the best quality meat. And so that sometimes that can seem discouraging. Sometimes I kind of get caught up in the, man, I want it to all be perfect. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Realizing that I need to control what I can control. Using the sourdough, using the whole grain. My kids are getting meat for breakfast. They're not eating cold cereal. Those sorts of things, that is within my control. Sometimes I have access to homemade sausage when we hunt and things like that, and we can make our own. And so that's obviously much better. And I like it when I have that, but that's not always the case. And sometimes even just reminding yourself that it doesn't have to be perfect. You're learning whatever stage you're at. It's a process and it's okay. This is what those look like coming out of the oven. And then this was what my plate looked like that morning for breakfast. I'm a firm believer in eating lots of eggs from our chickens. And this is what we had left over. Those go in the refrigerator great for another day. And like I say, that's just, they reheat super fast. We do not have a microwave. So I just put them on a cooking stone in the oven and let them reheat in the mornings. And it's a really fast one. So this next one that I am going to show you is English muffins. And these, again, when I started doing sourdough and saw people making English muffins, I thought, oh, that sounds so complicated. This is one of the simplest things to make. These really are super easy. You just throw together, It is literally flour and starter and salt and water. And you throw it all together the night before, or, the morning before. Like, again, I have done these to where I start them in the morning and I'm cooking them at night so that I can just reheat them in the morning for my family. Or I have actually tried to cook them fresh in the morning. They're a little bit more time consuming to cook, so I really prefer to have them done ahead of time. But it's very, very easy to throw the batter together initially. And then I have my daughter helping me. She wanted to help me make the English muffins. So this is later on that afternoon, and we are going to form these. Once you have it like that, once it's fermented and you're ready to form it, you make the English muffins, and then they have to sit for a couple of hours to do one final rise before you bake them. So this one is done a little bit in stages. This is early evening that she and I are working on this. Sometimes when my kids help me in the kitchen, depending on the day, it can make the job take longer. Sometimes it makes it seem more frustrating because you think, oh, I should just get it done. Man, what, just get down and let me do it. But I am realizing more and more, and this is as much talking to myself as it is talking to you all, that letting them be there and letting them try and letting them even do it wrong where you have to fix it. They are learning so much. Number one, they're seeing that they're allowed in the kitchen. The kitchen isn't just this forbidden place that everything has to be perfect and mom never lets me in there. So they're seeing that cooking can be fun. And then also seeing that, they don't care whether that English muffin is formed correctly or not. My daughter is just happy that she gets to help me, that she gets to spend some one-on-one time with me, that she gets to do what I'm doing. And so I have to remind myself of that. We had on another day, we were making cookies as a family and trying to get the cookies frosted. And everybody had a butter knife and a bowl of frosting. And as you can imagine, everyone but my toddler was involved in that. And it was not a clean experience. Let me say that. We had lots of frosting everywhere, food coloring everywhere. But you know what? It all washed off when we were done, and the kids had so much fun. And by the end of it, I even was enjoying, sitting there with them, and, we were all laughing at each other's frosting mistakes, and it was okay. So, anyway, there's my spiel on letting your kids help you in the kitchen. Like I say, I even have to be reminded of that. So here are those English muffins. I'm going to cover them up and let them sit, like I say, for a couple of hours, and then they will actually be ready to cook. So at this point, when they have sat, I use a iron skillet. This is actually a Dutch oven that I'm using, but any of my iron skillets will work for this. You just want it to have some sort of a lid. But you're going to want to get it pretty hot with a little bit of oil in the bottom of it before you ever put the English muffins in. I find that if I don't have it hot enough, then it changes the way they cook and they don't do as well. So you want it pretty hot. And then you're going to lay them in here. We're going to cover it up and let them cook for about 6 minutes on that side. And then we're going to flip them and do the same thing on the other side. And, when you think about English muffins from the store, usually the outside of them gets pretty brown. Sometimes there's even some black to it. So don't be afraid when you see these getting kind of dark. It's kind of the English muffin thing. And it doesn't seem to affect the taste. These actually turned out really nice. I have done some that get pretty black. But you know what? Everybody eats them and nobody really complains about it. And so it seems to turn out okay either way. But anyway, so after these are flipped, they'll cook for 6 minutes again, and then they should be done. If at that point you realize it's not cooked all the way through, you can throw them in the oven for, 10 minutes or so. But the idea is that they get completely baked in this iron skillet. So they're all stovetop cooked. And you really only want to see that one. That one looks just about perfect there. And you don't want to have to flip them more than once, because then you really are going to end up with the burnt outside. So adjusting your time, I said about 6 minutes. Sometimes if my skillet wasn't quite hot enough, I might have to do it for 8 minutes. But like I say, you want to cook them, do it just where you can cook them and then flip them and be done. And those are really good. Those make great breakfast sandwiches, as well as just putting some jam on them, or even cream cheese. So those are really nice and really handy. The next thing, this is a new one I've been playing with, is blueberry bagels. And I have been playing with how to get the blueberry flavoring in the bagels, or how to get the blueberry, how to do that part of it. I've been making like cinnamon bagels for a while, but perfecting how we like the blueberry bagels to turn out. And so far, this is a combination of a couple of different recipes. I think that was 1.5 cups of blueberries frozen with 1/2 to 3/4 cup of sugar. You can adjust that by how sweet you want it. You're going to cook them down. You want this to start getting a little bit thick. On this particular occasion, I actually cooked them down a little too far, so they thickened up a little bit too much, and so I ended up having to add a little bit of water back to it when I was actually making the bagels. But you do want this to thicken up a little bit, and then you want to let it cool. So I did that earlier in the day, then it just sat in my kitchen and cooled off. And then this is in the evening, I'm actually mixing up the bagel dough and getting that ready so these can sit overnight. And see here, this is the water that should be going in the bagel dough, but I realized that my blueberries were kind of stuck. And so I ended up having to put this pan back on the stove for a minute to warm it up, so that the water would help loosen up those blueberries. And it turned out fine. They still tasted fine. It worked fine. It just made a little bit more work for me. My lesson learned is not to cook them down quite so far. And you can make these without the sugar added at all. We have done it with just blueberries, and you just cook the blueberries, and then it doesn't get as sticky when you cook them because the added sugar isn't there. But I find with the because sourdough does have that more sour taste, that every now and then, if you want it to be a little bit sweet, you can add some sugar. And I feel like it doesn't get so sweet and overpowering as fast. And so we like having this just a little bit sweet when they're done. It's still not as sweet as a blueberry bagel you would buy from the store by any means. So here is that dough. It's going to come together like this to where it's cleaning the sides of the bowl. It's turned that nice purple color from all those blueberries. And this will sit overnight. Again, it's just going to sit in that mixing bowl. The next morning, it is nice and puffy, and I'm going to set it out and divide it. And this is another one that kind of is done in stages. So I'm going to divide this into eight bagels. And once I form the bagels, they're going to sit on, I put them on a stone. You could put them on any sort of a baking sheet or something, just something for them to sit on. And they're going to sit there for about 2 hours, and then you're going to need to boil them in water for a minute or so on each side. And then you put them in the oven for about 20 minutes. So this is not one that I usually do fresh for breakfast in the mornings. I like to, again, make them ahead. And that way, I might, be working on it in the morning, but we're not going to eat it today. We're going to eat it tomorrow, kind of a thing. When I make these, whether I'm making the bagels or the English muffins, or even things like hamburger buns, the forming of that initial bun shape is pretty universal. I find that whatever shape my piece of dough is in after I have divided it into the portions, I just kind of pull the corners in all to the bottom and have a side that is the top side that keeps getting stretched, the bottom side that keeps getting pushed in. and form your little bun. And then you go back and just poke a hole with your thumb on those bagels in the middle of them. And like I say, those are going to sit for a couple of hours. And a towel works. I have found in my house sometimes I need to put a little bit of saran wrap over the top to seal in the moisture, because where I live is a dry enough climate that the tops of them just dry out and they don't rise as nicely. So I have actually started using saran wrap in the place of a towel in a lot of these recipes to trap that moisture in, and it helps them do better with the rising, whether it's my bread or the bagels or any of the other items. So that's the water. Once it boils, you saw me adding a little bit of sugar and a little bit of baking soda. There's a chemical reaction there that what it's doing is it's forming that shiny outer layer. When you think of a bagel, they have a little bit of a crust to them, and that's what this boiling process is doing. So in my big stew pot, I can fit 4 bagels, and so I kind of try to picture where I've put them and just put 4 in there. And after they've been in there for a second, they will eventually float to the top, like these are doing. Okay, and so then once they float, I will flip them over and usually let them sit in the water for another 30 seconds or so. And then they can come out and they are ready to be baked. And there was that little hand again. My son was just watching what I was doing. How precious that is, and how blessed I am that is a part of my daily routine, that having them right there is part of what I do. I'm very, very grateful for that. And you do kind of be gentle when you take this out of the water, because they rise more when they hit that warm water. And so it makes them even more soft, and they can fall apart on you, but you know what? They still taste good even when they do. So don't be afraid of it if it doesn't turn out right the first time. So that is all of those boiled now and ready to go in the oven. And say those make a really, really nice side to go with some eggs in the morning, maybe some sausage, whatever you like to put with them. Put some cream cheese on them. I hope that y'all will give some of these recipes a try and let me know what you think. Thank you all for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I appreciate y'all's support. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you in my next one. So bye for now.